هرچی شما تعلل بکنیم و به نتیجه این نرسیم، این بدبینی توسعه پیدا میکنه.
Iran's voters elected a new president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the pop star of Iranian politics. And America had a new Secretary of State. As National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice had not concentrated on Iran. Now she put it at the top of her agenda.
I met Secretary Rice at the airport and we had a long talk on the ride into Brussels. She said that Iran was beginning to increase its assistance both to Shia militants in Iraq, to the Hezbollah, to Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So Iran had become the largest funder and supplier of arms to most of the Middle East groups that were shooting at us or shooting at the Israelis or the moderate Palestinians. And secondly, Iran was continuing its nuclear research.
Rice made Burns her deputy and asked him to take on the Iran brief. She wanted to know if the State Department was up to the job.
I went back to Condi and reported that, Condi, we have half a person in the entire Department of State devoted to one of the most significant countries in the world, and she was appalled.
Back here!
Within days, Rice would receive a report from Iraq that would strengthen her resolve to deal with Iran. She had sent a trusted colleague to Iraq to find out what was going wrong. Shia militias backed by Iran were emerging as the biggest threat to Western success in Iraq. Rice's advisor was briefed by US and UK intelligence that in the Shia south, more and more coalition soldiers were being killed by a new type of roadside mine. It could penetrate even armored vehicles.
It's rare to get a convergence of intelligence from so many different kinds of sources and from several different agencies that all end up pointing in the same direction.
American and British intelligence concluded that these mines were factory-made in Iran.
The people who are being killed by these devices were our soldiers in the field, and they were the people who literally had gone to the sites of these explosions and cleaned up the bodies and body parts of their comrades. From their point of view, one more soldier getting killed is huge.
Secretary Rice's counselor reported back, Iraq remains a failed state and an open field for violent Iranian subversion. But by now, President Bush wasn't ready to strike at the sponsors of terrorism. Instead, he had the State Department send a secret warning to Iran.
The continuation of this Iranian behavior would be regarded by us as enemy action.
America's warning was delivered in the autumn of 2005. Iran's response came via Europe.
There are various Iranians who would come to London and suggest we had tea in in some hotel or other. So they do the same in Paris, they do the same in Berlin, and then we compare notes among the three of us.
The Iranians' tea time initiative was breathtakingly bold.
The Iranians wanted to be able to strike a deal whereby they stopped killing our forces in Iraq in return for them being allowed to carry on with their nuclear program. We stop killing you in Iraq, stop undermining the political process there, you allow us to carry on with our nuclear program without let or hindrance.
You said we can make life easier for you in Iraq if you give Iran's nuclear program a pass. What sort of deal were you offering?
As you remember, many members of that meeting went public and denied that statement had ever been made.
But you're not denying it, are you?
No. What I'm saying is that Iran can and has played an active role and supportive role both in Afghanistan and Iraq
You're
in
saying
Iraq,
here
and we
it could play a more active role. You're
It's
saying
realpolitik. From the Iranians' point of view, they wanted freedom on the nuclear dossier.
The West ignored the offer of a deal, but Iran had made it clear. If it were attacked, its allies in Iraq would kill more Americans, British and Iraqis there. President Ahmadinejad announced that Iran would restart its nuclear enrichment plant.
اونها از سلاح هسته‌ای نمیترسند، از خودباوری ملت ما میترسند. بدانید ملت ایران از حق مسلم خود صرف نظر نخواهد کرد. بشنوید این صدای ملت ایران است که نظر خود را به صراحت نسبت به انرژی هسته‌ای اعلام می‌کند. بشنوید.
A few weeks later, Jack Straw played host to Condoleezza Rice in his constituency. The confrontation with Iran was pulling the US and the UK apart. For the first time since the invasion of Iraq, the UK was refusing to endorse American threats.
I was saying, hang on, you just need to understand that there aren't any circumstances in which this British government, or in my view, any British government, could be involved in military action against Iran.
Secretary of State, what next steps could be taken to persuade the Iranians to pull back from the uranium enrichment program? Jack Straw keeps telling us that military action will never be used.
First of all, the American president never takes any option off the table. You don't want the American president to take any option off the table. To respond to
my point, from a British perspective, was that since I thought that it would be completely inappropriate and counterproductive to take military action, and given the background of Iraq, I think we would have been involved in a political firestorm if I had given a hint that military action was a possibility. Now, I may say Tony Blair took a different view about that.
Within the month, Blair would remove Jack Straw from the Foreign Office. But he still had one last chance to exploit the special relationship.
At the end of the trip, Connie and I went to her plane.
Straw stayed on board. He flew with Rice on an unscheduled trip to Iraq.
On that trip, we spent quite a long time in her cabin talking about Iran. My message to Condi was this: we Europeans have gone as far as we can by ourselves, and frankly, so far as the Iranians are concerned, we Europeans are a sprat to catch a mackerel, and you're the big fish, the United States.
After changing planes in Kuwait, they arrived in the war zone. In the previous month, 1,000 Iraqis and 31 Americans had died there.
Sunnis and Shias were killing each other across the length and breadth of the country. The government of Iraq couldn't come together around a new prime minister, in part because Iran was deeply involved. We wanted to counter the Iranian pressure. All this was going on at the same time that journalists in the United States were writing that we were getting ready for war with Iran.
It was clear to me that she was anxious to find a way through this, and that she would, if she could, seek to get other principals and the president on board for direct involvement in talks with the Iranians.
Rice was about to attempt her most audacious move as Secretary of State. It was the Easter holidays. George and Laura Bush hosted an Easter egg hunt at the White House. But Condi Rice stayed home.
She asked her staff to give her a series of calendars for April and May and June, July. And she began to sketch out a diplomatic strategy that would get us to negotiation.